My name is Dutch Calloway. I'm 69 years old. For 27 years, I've worked the night door at Haven House Shelter. Most people think that's all I do. I check people in. I lock up at 11. I know every regular's name and which bed they like best. That's what they see. That's all they've ever asked to see. They don't know I founded this shelter. They don't know I hold the deed through a trust, quiet as a locked door for 27 years. They don't know why I built it, or what it cost me to learn I needed to. My daughter Vanessa doesn't know either. Vanessa runs the nonprofit now. She's the executive director. She wears blazers to board meetings and talks about impact metrics. 3 weeks ago, my phone rang while I was doing my 10 o'clock walkthrough. It was Yolanda Reyes, our shift supervisor. She's worked here for 14 years. Her voice was tight. "Dutch," she said, "you need to see what's on the Gala agenda for Thursday." I asked her what she meant. "Vanessa's been talking to Maricot Regional," she said. "The big charity conglomerate. They want to absorb Haven House, close the building, route everyone to a call-and intake system instead." I stood in the hallway, keys still in my hand. A resident named Old Tom's shuffled past me toward his room, nodding the way he always does. "Close it for what?" I asked. $19 million, Yolanda said. "A restructuring grant. Maricot gets to claim our numbers for their annual report." "Dutch, Vanessa thinks the board owns this building free and clear. She has no idea about your trust." I didn't say anything for a moment. Down the hall, someone's radio played low gospel music, the way it does every night. "Does the board know?" I asked. "No," Yolanda said. "Nobody knows but you. And now me." I thanked her. I told her not to tell Vanessa I was coming. I hadn't sat through a board meeting in 7 years. I liked staying in the background. It let me walk these halls without anyone treating me like a donor instead of the doorman. And Vanessa, I think, liked me being invisible too. It let her build her career as the woman who modernized a struggling little shelter without anyone asking who actually kept the lights on when the grants ran dry. But nobody keeps a shelter alive for free. Somebody pays first. I paid first. I had a younger brother named Curtis. Curtis came home from Vietnam different than he left. He couldn't hold a job. He couldn't sleep indoors without panicking some nights. By the time I understood how bad it had gotten, he was already living on the streets downtown, and this city didn't have a single shelter bed built for a man like him. I searched for 2 winters straight, looking for somewhere warm to put my brother. I found waiting lists. I found closed intake windows. I found a system that had no room for a proud man too ashamed to ask twice. I remember the last time I saw him alive. It was 3 days before he died. I brought him a sandwich and a blanket, and he waved me off, proud even then, telling me he'd be fine, telling me to stop worrying so much about a grown man. I believed him because I wanted to. That's the part I've never forgiven myself for. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to fight for him. Curtis died on a park bench 3 blocks from where Haven House stands today. Hypothermia. Alone. Nobody even called me until the next afternoon. A patrol officer found my number in his coat pocket, on a scrap of paper I'd written for him months before, in case he ever needed it. I used every dollar I had after that. I used every dollar I could borrow. I bought the old warehouse where Haven House sits now. I put it in a trust in Curtis's name, so no proud, struggling man in this city would ever again have nowhere warm to go. I never told anyone outside my lawyer's office what I'd done. I just started working the night door myself, because I wanted to be the one who let people in, not the man who owned the building from a distance. Vanessa was 7 years old the year Curtis died. She grew up believing her father was just a shelter worker who cared a lot about homeless people. She never asked why Haven House always had funding for new beds and hot meals when other shelters in the city were shutting their doors. She never asked who really owned the building she walked into every day for board meetings. I decided it was time she found out. The night before the gala, I walked the halls alone after the last residents settled in. Yolanda let me stay past my shift. I stood in the intake room, where Curtis's photo hangs on the wall next to the house rules, and I thought about the 2 winters I spent searching for a bed that didn't exist. Yolanda found me there around midnight. "You don't have to do this tomorrow," she said. "There are quieter ways to stop a merger." "Maybe," I said. But Vanessa spent her whole career assuming quiet means empty. I think it's time she learned different. She didn't argue. She just squeezed my shoulder and walked back toward the front desk. The gala was Thursday night. Maricot Regional had rented the shelter's own community room and dressed it up like a hotel ballroom. String lights over the folding chairs. A catering table where the donation counter usually sits. A projector screen looping charts about consolidated service delivery and regional efficiency gains. I put on my one good jacket. I walked in through the side door in my work boots, because that's who I've always been at these things. The doorman, standing near the coat rack, saying nothing. Vanessa was up front near the podium, laughing with 2 women in sharper blazers than her own. She spotted me near the coat rack and didn't lower her voice at all. "Dad," she said to a woman beside her, loud enough for half the room to hear, "this is my father. He's just the night doorman here. Doesn't really weigh in on the strategic side." The woman gave a polite, dismissive nod and turned back to Vanessa without another glance my way. I felt that one land. 27 years of keeping this shelter alive, and I was just the night doorman who didn't weigh in on the strategic side. I didn't say a word. I found a folding chair near the back, next to the donation counter I'd stood behind 1,000 nights. I sat down. I waited. A young overnight staffer named Marcus found me there a few minutes later, carrying a tray of drinks he wasn't supposed to be serving. "You okay, Dutch?" he asked. "You've got a look on your face." "I'm fine," I said. "Just listening." He nodded and moved on, the way young people do when they sense something in an old man they can't quite name. I looked around the room. Board members who'd nodded to me in the hallway for years without ever asking my last name. A city council aide posing for photos near the projector screen. My daughter's whole future laid out on that screen, built on a foundation she didn't know was mine. I found out later, from Yolanda, why Vanessa pushed this deal so hard. Haven House's grant funding had been shrinking for 3 years running. Vanessa felt that pressure every quarter, watching donor numbers slip, worried she'd be the director who let this place go under on her watch. A $19 million restructuring offer must have looked like rescue instead of betrayal, from where she was standing. I didn't know any of that yet, sitting in my folding chair. All I knew was the word doorman, said with a laugh, loud enough for strangers to hear. The Maricot rep took the podium first, sharp blazer, sharper slides. She talked about consolidated service delivery and regional efficiency gains. She said the $19 million would fund a call-in intake hotline covering 4 counties, no physical beds required. Response times for a man freezing on a park bench be damned. Then Vanessa got up. She talked about growth. She talked about honoring Haven House's legacy while embracing smart consolidation. She said the vote tonight was mostly a formality, since the board, in her words, holds clear title to this property, free and clear. That was the moment. I stood up from my folding chair. My knees cracked loud enough that a man 2 rows up turned around. "Vanessa," I said, "can I ask a question?" She smiled the way you smile at your dad when he's about to embarrass you in public. "Sure, Dad. Go ahead." "Who exactly owns this building?" I said. "Free and clear," you said. "The board," she said, "has since before I was director." I nodded slowly. I reached into my jacket. I pulled out a folded copy of the deed, 27 years old, soft at the creases from being checked once a year, every year, just to make sure it was still real. "This building," I said, "is owned by the Curtis Calloway Memorial Trust. Established 27 years ago. I'm the sole trustee." The room went silent the way a shelter goes silent right after curfew. "That's not possible," Vanessa said. Her smile hadn't caught up with her eyes yet. "It's very possible," I said. I bought this building the year your Uncle Curtis died on a park bench 3 blocks from here. I paid for the boiler replacement in 2009. I paid for every bed this shelter has ever added. Every dollar Haven House has spent on capacity went through a trust with my name on it, not the board's. Yolanda, standing near the coat rack, pressed her hand to her mouth. You can't close what you don't own, honey, I said, as gently as I could manage in front of that whole room. And I don't own a hotline. I own a shelter. The Marriott rep started talking fast, something about pre-existing agreements and asset transfer clauses. I let her talk. Paperwork doesn't care how good your slides look, and her slides never once mentioned my trust. Because her team never checked. Vanessa found her voice again. Dad, this deal is real funding. This modernizes how we serve people. This is the future. The future, I said, is a man like your Uncle Curtis finding a warm bed the same night he needs one. Not a phone number he has to call from a payphone that doesn't exist anymore. That's the future I built. Not a hotline where a shelter used to be. Somebody near the front started clapping. It was Marcus, tray still in his hands. Others joined him. The applause rolled through the community room like something the building itself had been waiting to release. Vanessa's face went through several colors. Embarrassment first, then anger, then something that looked almost like grief. Why didn't you ever tell me, she said, quieter now, meant just for me, though the microphone up front was still hot and half the room heard her anyway. Because you never asked, I said. You asked about grant cycles. You asked about donor metrics. You asked about board optics. You never once asked who actually owned the roof over your uncle's memory. I let you build a career thinking this place ran on nothing but goodwill and hard work. That's on me too. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't only trying to save the shelter that night. Part of me wanted Vanessa to feel, just once, as small as she'd made me feel by the coat rack. I'm not proud of that part. But I'm telling you the truth. A board member named Councilwoman Ibarra stood up before any vote could happen. She looked straight at Vanessa. Miss Calloway, she said, using the formal tone people use when they mean business, did you draft this merger without confirming who holds title first? Vanessa's jaw tightened. I was told the board held clear ownership. Told by whom? She hesitated. The pause answered the question better than words could have. Nobody told me directly, she finally admitted. I assumed it. I've directed this organization 5 years. I never had a reason to think otherwise. An older board member, Dr. Whitcomb, leaned toward Vanessa. Dear, I think we pull this whole thing off tonight's agenda, and we do it now. The Marriott rep tried one more angle. Perhaps a hybrid model, she offered. Physical beds alongside our hotline infrastructure. Everyone wins. There's no hybrid model that closes this building, I said. You either keep the doors open, or you don't. Curtis needed a door that opened, not a phone number to memorize while he froze. Ibarra nodded firmly. The gentleman makes a fair point, and a compelling one. The board tabled the merger that night. My deed mattered, but Yolanda is the one who truly turned the room. She stood up after me and read 14 years of intake data. Beds filled on the coldest nights. Lives that a phone hotline could never have reached in time. Numbers no regional efficiency chart could replace. The room didn't need me to be a hero. It needed the truth laid out plainly, and once it was there, the vote fell apart on its own. Marriott Regional withdrew their offer within the week. Word travels fast when a $19 million deal collapses over a trust deed nobody bothered to search for. The local paper ran the story 2 days later. Yolanda texted me the article with 3 exclamation points. Marcus printed it out and taped it to the staff room corkboard right under the shift schedule. Strangers started stopping me at the grocery store. A woman I barely knew grabbed my hand near the register and said, "My brother slept here 2 winters ago. I didn't know it was your money that kept the doors open." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't, most days. I didn't do it for the thanks. I did it for Curtis. Dr. Whitcomb caught me in the hallway a few days later. "27 years hiding a story like that," he said, shaking his head. "I've known you 7 years, Dutch. I had no idea." "That was the point," I told him. "Nobody was supposed to know." "Well," he said, "I'm glad we finally do." Vanessa didn't call me for 5 days. Those 5 days were harder than I expected. I'd imagined relief once the truth was finally out in the open. Instead, I got silence, and silence from your only daughter feels heavier than any argument ever could. Yolanda called on the 3rd day. "You did the right thing," she said. "Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt to wait." "I know," I said. On the 6th day, Vanessa showed up at Haven House after her shift ended, in jeans instead of a blazer, looking younger than I'd seen her look in years. She found me in the intake room, standing beside Curtis's photo. "I need you to explain it to me," she said. "All of it, not the version from the Gala." So I told her. I told her about Curtis and the 2 winters I spent searching for a bed that didn't exist. I told her about the park bench and the phone call that came a full day too late. I told her about buying this warehouse with every dollar I had, 42 years old, hands shaking, furious at a system that let a good man freeze to death 3 blocks from where we stood. I told her I never talked about it, because talking about it meant admitting how much guilt I still carried for not finding him a bed sooner. Guilt like that doesn't heal on its own, it just goes quiet. Mine went quiet for 27 years. She cried in that intake room. I hadn't seen my daughter cry since she was a little girl. "I called you the doorman," she said. "In front of donors." "You did," I said. "I'm sorry, Dad, I know." We sat there a long while, surrounded by the framed photos of residents who'd found their footing again, decades of them, lining the intake room walls. Eventually, she asked the question I'd been waiting 27 years for somebody to ask. "Why did you never make me a trustee?" "Because I wasn't sure you wanted the shelter," I said. "I thought you wanted the title, the blazer, the board seat. I didn't know if you wanted the actual weight of it." "I want the weight of it," she said. "I want to know what it's for." "Can I ask you something else?" Vanessa said after a quiet moment. "Did you ever think about just telling me? No gala, no board meeting, just sitting me down and saying, 'Here's what happened to your uncle, and here's what I built because of it.'" I thought about that honestly before answering. "More times than I can count," I said. "I'd get close at your college graduation, or the day you took this job. Something always stopped me." "What stopped you?" "Guilt, mostly," I said. "If I told you the shelter was mine, I'd have to tell you why. And telling you why meant admitting I let my own brother die because I didn't fight hard enough, fast enough, for a bed that didn't exist yet. I wasn't ready to say that out loud for a long time." "That wasn't your fault," she said. "You were one man against a system with no room for him." "I know that now," I said. "It took me a long time to believe it." 3 months later, I added Vanessa as co-trustee. She doesn't get final say over the building that stays mine until I'm gone, but she sits with me now when real decisions get made. She's seen the deed. She's seen Curtis's name on the founding papers. She understands, finally, that Haven House was never a line item on a grant report. It was a debt I spent my whole adult life trying to repay. The merger is dead. Maricot Regional moved on to another city's shelter system, I imagine, the way conglomerates always do. Our building still stands exactly where it's always stood, 3 blocks from the park bench where I lost my brother, doors open every night, no exceptions. Yolanda still runs the overnight shift. She still calls me Dutch, not the doorman, which means more to me than she probably realizes. Marcus made shift supervisor last month. Vanessa pinned his badge on herself in the same community room where I'd stood invisible at the coat rack, watching my daughter almost close away everything Curtis's death had built. This time, I wasn't invisible. Vanessa called me up to stand beside her for the photo. "This is my father," she said to the room. "He founded this shelter. Everything we do here, We do because of him. I still work the night door most evenings, even now. Vanessa asked to shadow me last month, just to see what the overnight shift actually looks like. We didn't talk much while we worked. Some things don't need words. We just checked people in together, side by side, the way a father and daughter are supposed to. You think Uncle Curtis would be proud of this place? She asked me, near the end of the shift. I think he'd be proud you finally asked, I said. Some men build monuments with their names carved in stone. I built a shelter, and I let my own daughter believe it belonged to a faceless board for 27 years. Because guilt is a hard thing to explain out loud, and silence was easier than the truth. If there's one thing I'd tell you, watching wherever you're watching this, it's this. The quietest person in the room is sometimes the one holding the deed. Don't assume the man checking names at the door has nothing to say. He might own the whole building. He might have built it out of a grief he spent decades turning into somewhere warm for strangers to sleep. If you believe respect is earned in silence and paid back in full when it's least expected, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to The Forgotten Father if you want more stories like mine. Real stories about fathers and grandfathers who let their actions speak long after the world stopped listening. And tell me in the comments, would you have stood up at that gala the way I did? Or would you have let the silence hold a little longer? I'll read every answer. This is Dutch Calloway, and this is my true story.